On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, are we buying the early hype for the Anaheim Ducks and the Montreal Canadiens?
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked On NHL, we play a little buy or sell with a couple of teams going in the right direction and a couple of teams that are not. We'll also talk about the Stadium Series reveal. We know where and one of the teams that will be involved in the 2027 Stadium Series. So we'll talk about that as well today. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, joined today by Rachel Donner of Locked On Flyers. And Rachel, we're gonna put our game show shoes on to talk about a few teams that are kind of going in the right and wrong directions. Let's start with the Montreal Canadiens, a team that I think a lot of people have been looking at here over the last couple of years. They've got a ton of young talent. It seems like this year they have finally put it together, and they're one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference at this point. So buy or sell? Are you buying or selling the Canadiens being for real this year?
I'm absolutely buying this team. The Montreal Canadiens are a team that have done rebuild just as right as you can possibly do it. I know we're not like to the promised land yet, so to speak, with them, but they have done everything right along the way. Now, did they luck into a first overall pick? They did with Yaroslav Kovsky, which was an interesting pick, and it's taken them a while to bring him along, right? But now things are clicking into place with that top line. They found great line mates for him in Suzuki and Caulfield. Like, how can one complain about that as your top line, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the production has been outstanding. And I think the thing that really kind of stands out for me so far this year for the Canadiens is they're getting the goaltending. Last year, that was a little bit of a question mark for them throughout the season, but Jakob Dobeš has been unbelievable in his game so far this year. He's won all 6 that he's been in. Sam Montembeault, 3-3, but I think if you can really see Dobeš take that next step and really go to that next level, that's where this Canadiens team can start thinking about, let's look at what we need to pull in at the trade deadline, and let's turn this into a legitimate move, because a lot of the mainstays that we expect to see in the East down starts to the season, and so there's definitely a spot to be had for Montreal to grab a playoff spot and grab a high playoff spot if they can keep this rolling.
Yeah, I mean, Dobeš was NHL third star of the month for October, and there's a reason for that. He has come on so strong. I want to be cautiously optimistic about that, and goaltending is so fickle, and I don't want to put too many eggs in that basket. But for Montreal, they have such a well-rounded team that I think they're going to be okay, even if his play falls off even a little bit. But you look at Caulfield and Suzuki, league leaders in goals and assists, early on in the season. And it's not even just that top line, because you have Demidov coming on strong there as well. And then, I think Noah Dobson, that pickup by Montreal was one of the best offseason moves around the NHL. And that has just shored up their blue line in a way that was sorely lacking. And for Dobson, I think he just didn't fit with the Islanders, but he fits with this Montreal team in a way that has just, carried them through. And then, Lane Hudson just signs like a huge extension there. And so like this team is going to go places, and I think go places for a very long time.
And it's funny too, because I think there were some questions about whether Martin St. Louis was going to be, is he the right fit to coach this team? Like, they just don't seem like they don't seem like they're taking any strides or making any progress over the last couple of years. And credit to the front office, credit to management for exercising some restraint. You see a lot of times in these situations where, I mean, look at the team that we'll talk about here in a second. The Ducks have done it a couple of times where they just are like, yeah, our young players they're not making much as far as progress goes. We're going to move on, make a change. But he's been leading the way. Montreal's been playing fantastic. And yeah, I'm with you. I'm absolutely buying what the Canadiens are putting out there right now. Speaking of the Ducks, the Anaheim Ducks off to a great start this season as well. One of the top teams in the Pacific so far this season. How do we feel about Anaheim's start this year? Are you buying or selling what the Ducks have done so far?
I hesitate to say buying. I think ultimately that's where I fall, but I'm very much less confident about that with the Anaheim Ducks. And I think that there's a couple of reasons. One, your point about them jumping ship on young talent very quickly doesn't give me a lot of confidence. Now, as somebody who covers the Flyers, thank you for Trevor Zegras, like very happy about that. However, I just think that the one thing that is on the positive side for this is the Chris Kreider pickup for me. I think that it has very much surprised me how well he's fit in there. And that's just the right type of veteran presence that this group of young players they have in Anaheim needs to help bolster them and, push them forward. I do think the Pacific Division is a little weaker than maybe we would have expected so far this year, and the Ducks could be benefiting from that. I think Vegas hasn't performed as well as we would have thought to begin. The Oilers haven't either. So I am a little hesitant, but I do see a definite improvement this season over past seasons when all is said and done.
Cautious optimism is I think how I'm going to put it on my end, because we've seen the Ducks do this. They did this a couple of seasons ago where they were right outside of playoff contention all the way through like the first half of the season, and it fell apart. Right. You have to be able to hold and carry through the entirety of the season. This is something that we saw from the Utah at the time, the Utah Hockey Club. They had a great start to the season, and that fizzled as well. As you see these young teams kind of get off to those great starts, and the season finally catches up to them. Now, I will say some of the young talent that the Ducks possess. Obviously, one name in particular that is off to a great start is Cutter Gauthier. He's got 7 goals so far this season.
Never heard of him. Don't even know who that is.
That is the other half of the aforementioned trade for Trevor Zegras. But you're getting
that was the Jamie Drysdale trade, but
right, that was the Drysdale trade. I get my Ducks.
Listen, a lot of Ducks Flyers trades, so easy to mix up.
Yeah, it happens. They're getting good, solid production, evenly spread production throughout the lineup. Like Gauthier, obviously at the top of the line, but Troy Terry, Leo Carlson, Chris Kreider, as you mentioned, all at the top of the leaderboard as far as goals go. Can they get? We have seen some nice things from Beckett Seneca so far as well. It comes down to, can they sustain this? Can they push this through the entirety of a season? Or are we going to see a second half swoon like we've seen time and time again? The interesting thing, too, is the last couple of years, we've seen kind of the last bit of John Gibson's career in Anaheim. No more John Gibson. This is Lucas Dostal's team. And
can't blame it on Gibson anymore if things go south.
If he can do a little bit of what Dustin Wolf did last year for the Flames, that would be a situation where I think the Ducks can keep this rolling. But they're going to need him to be solid in net if they want to finish as a playoff team. So I'm going to just say cautious optimism. I like what I see so far, but I need to see a little more of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're going to flip to a couple of teams that are trending in a concerning way, and one of them did win last night, but still concerned. We'll talk about the Blues and the Capitals as we continue today's episode of Locked On NHL after this. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. The best part about Monarch is it simplifies everything into one central location. No more multiple apps scrolling to try to find all of your different financial accounts. Monarch brings it all together in one place. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to today's edition of Locked On NHL. We are, again, your team each and every day. We thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and all of your favorite podcast platforms if you have not already, so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. All right, we're sticking with the buy and sell, Rachel, and I wanted to look at a couple of teams. You know, we talk about the hot starts. Couple of teams that are going through some funk right now, and one of which has been in a funk all season. We're going to start with the St. Louis Blues. Now, I know they won last night. They beat Edmonton 3-2, but I still think you look at the overall record for St. Louis, 4-7-2 on the season. Rough start to the year. Are you buying or selling concern about the St. Louis Blues not being able to dig out of this?
Yeah, I'm buying that concern. That is for sure. I think, one of the biggest issues with that team right now is scoring. Like they just aren't getting it from anywhere. And it's one thing when certain top guys are in a slump, but then, your bottom six picks up the slack or something like that. And that is definitely a problem there. And I would be very concerned. And, they're not getting enough shots on goal to even get to the point where they're scoring, right? They're averaging 27.3 shots per game at the moment, which, it's not the worst in the league, but that is not going to get you where you need to go if you're going to try and get over a hump of losing streaks like that.
And it seems like a Blues team that is fine. You talk about a team finding ways to win. It feels like this Blues team has been finding ways to come up just short. And, it mirrors a lot of what I've seen so far this year with the Minnesota Wild. You fall behind early in games and you spend the entire game chasing and trying to dig out of an early hole. I look at the stats, and Jordan Kyrou with 4 goals so far this year, that's not nearly enough for what he's being paid to do. And Robert Thomas, who just came back from injury, he's sitting on 2 goals himself. Like, those are top-end guys. Those are top-end lineup guys that you need just a ton of production from. And, to flip it to the defensive side, Rachel, I have legitimate concerns about this blue line for St. Louis. Like, it's an older blue line. They are not overly physical, but they kind of tend to get picked on a little bit by their opponents. And I think unless St. Louis does something to address that, I think that's just going to be an easy attack point for opposing teams the whole season.
Yeah, I think the problem for me there is that they have too many offensive defensemen there and not enough defensive defensemen, and the offensive defensemen aren't being successful offensively, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the benefit that you're trying to get from putting together a blue line like that isn't coming to fruition, and then they're not doing the defensive job either. And that's like kind of like that is just not going to get you anywhere, because offense from the blue line is really what has sustained this team to some extent.
It's been a puzzling start to the year for Joel Hofer as well, their young backup goaltender. And you look, and he's got a 5.16 goals against average and 829 save percentage. And he gave up 7 to Chicago. He gave up 5 to Pittsburgh that I think are really, those two are really buoying those numbers. But, you know, you can't play Jordan Binnington every game. And so that's been one of the issues as well, is they just, their backup spot has not been great.
Yeah, I think, the canary in the coal mine for this team to me is that Milan Lucic signed a PTO with their AHL team in Springfield. And I know he had like a PTO with them in the summer and kind of flamed out with an injury in training camp. But like that is not your approach to try and dig yourself out of here. And I know it is with the AHL team, but that's just like organizationally, like, what are you doing here? Like, how are you trying to fix it? And that is not the move.
No, that's not going to help pull you out of it at this point. Like, as we see with some of these rosters that they get a little older, there's this reluctance to inject a little bit of youth into it to try to bring a spark, try to bring a little energy. That's the route you got to go. But for the Blues, they seem pretty content to ride with that lineup, at least at this point. One of the surprise teams of last year, the Washington Capitals, they have lost 4 games in a row, and they find themselves near the bottom of the Metropolitan standings. Now, it is early, and it is a Capitals team that still features the services of Alex Ovechkin. So, buy or sell, are you concerned with how things are trending for the Washington Capitals right now?
I'm a little concerned, but I'm not a lot concerned here. I think, it's interesting because the Blues are playing the Capitals, so one of these two teams has to win tomorrow night. But I think, the Washington Capitals have one incredible thing going for them in that they draft and develop better than almost any team in the NHL. And you look at their young prospects playing on that team right now. First of all, Connor McMichael, I know he had a breakout season last year. He's off to a little bit of a slow start, but there's room for him to pick things back up. Ryan Leonard is a tremendous hockey player. And I think he will, as he adjusts to the league, like pick up a little bit more. And then you have that along with the veteran presence that they have there. Alex Ovechkin always figures out a time to kick things into gear almost out of nowhere. I think, they're just kind of lacking some scoring right now that I have no doubt will start to pick up at some point.
Yeah, I like that. I'm concerned, but not like hit the panic button at this point. Logan Thompson still, his numbers are incredible, even though he's sitting at 5-3. He's still giving you high caliber goaltending. One of the big things that this team's going to need to figure out here in the short term, obviously, is how to replace Pierre-Luc Dubois,
Right.
who that was one of the big moves of the offseason, and people were like, why are you trading for this guy? He's not going to give you anything. He actually had a pretty good year last year, and that just takes away from some of that center depth. So they're going to need to figure out how to replace that internally, but this just feels to me like a little bit of a lull that happens to have happened at the beginning of the season. And anytime you have one of those, it usually gets magnified. If you have it during the middle of the season, nobody bats an eye. But right at the beginning of the season, that's when some of those alarm bells start going off.
Yeah, and I think that the Washington Capitals are a team that everybody thinks, oh, is this the year they're going to fall off? Right. And so expectations are never that high for this team. So they're not really playing under a lot of pressure right now. And they'll figure it out. And I think that they will make the playoffs. It may be in the wild card spot, but I do think eventually they'll turn it around and make the playoffs.
Yeah, that as long as Logan Thompson continues to give them that high level goaltending, they'll be in most every game, and that's what they need at this point. So we're going to finish a couple of news items to discuss. We did learn where the Stadium Series will be played, or at least one of the Stadium Series games will be played in 2027. So we'll talk about that. Plus, an emotional return to the ice for Brad Marchand, and he ended up with a goal. So we'll talk about that also as we finish today's Locked On NHL after this. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making a late push. And if you want to focus on something a little more long-term, futures bets are an amazing place to go. You can bet on potential MVPs, who you think is going to host the championship trophy. It's all at your fingertips with FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real. Getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer for your team. Game Time's prices actually go down the closer you get to kickoff or puck drop or opening tip, which makes it way more fun to be spontaneous with your trips. Game Time gives you the advantage. It's the ultimate hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Final segment of today's edition of Locked On NHL. And once again, we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. We also are your team each and every day as well. Seth, Toupal, and Rachel Donner here. And Rachel, it was announced yesterday that the Stadium Series is coming to Dallas, as the 2027 Stadium Series will be hosted by AT&T Stadium on February 20th. Now, that leads you to believe that the Dallas Stars are one of the teams that's involved. We don't know the other, but were you surprised at all by the announcement that that Dallas is getting a Stadium Series game, or did this feel, as the Dallas Stars being kind of one of the more premier Western Conference teams, does it just feel inevitable?
I mean, I think it does. And I think one of the things when you're looking at the waning end of Gary Bettman's career in the NHL, I think, having as many Southern tier events like this to kind of cement his legacy is a big aspect of this decision, I think. And so this is a big part of it for me in terms of the decision, because you look at, the Winter Classic and Stadium Series are both in Florida for this season. And so it just kind of feels like a very Gary Bettman thing to do.
Yeah, and I saw him he was at the stadium to make the announcement with the Monday Night Football game, and he was right up there on the stage. And it is funny because evidently there were some outdoor venues that were looked at in Texas for this, but obviously an indoor arena means that you can control the temps a little bit. You don't have any potential ice melting issues, which just seems like an expected thing anytime you go into one of those southern states.
Well, that's what I don't like about this decision. I think that unless it's actively raining, I don't want a roof over an outdoor game. I mean, that's the whole point, is taking the game outdoors, and this is not outdoors. I've never been to an event at this stadium, but I did take the tour, and it just doesn't feel right. I mean, honestly, it just does not feel right as a quote unquote outdoor game. I think if you want to have a special event game there and not call it and refer to it as an outdoor game that's not the stadium series, there's something there, I guess. But Winter Classic and Stadium Series should be outdoors. Like, that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, and I don't know if we need to just meld the two of them together, but it just if I'm being fully honest, like, I hear the announcements and I'm like, wait, what's the difference? Like, you've got both that occur at different stadiums than you typically have your games at. So I don't know if we've hit the overkill point with these or not, or just need to kind of cut the number down a little bit. But it is something that the NHL continues to try to really push, and they trying to get to as many markets as they can.
Yeah, I mean, there's no flaw in that logic. It's just there's been a tradition built around it, and I think they should stick to the tradition while trying to bring it to new places.
Yeah, I would like to see. I think back to the Winter Classic game the Seattle Kraken had at Safeco Field, and they had just all of the Kraken theming leading out to the ice. You had the docks in deep water with the tentacles coming out of it. Make it fun. Have there be a lot of fanfare involved, and just turn it into a big spectacle. That's kind of what I want to see with these types of things. So, whatever Dallas theming you need to have to make it work, just make it big, make it a big spectacle, and turn it into one of those celebrated games as opposed to just another game that's going on in the schedule. We're going to finish by taking a look. Brad Marchand, who was away from the Panthers over the weekend, made his return to the ice. He did end up scoring a goal. Now, the reason that he left the Panthers was to help out a friend of his whose daughter had unfortunately passed away. So he stepped in to coach his little league team. And it's obviously a terrible situation all around, Rachel, but what an emotional return for Marchand to the ice.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. And this man has done everything to make me hate him less and less every single year. Covering the Flyers and going up against him all those years, on the Bruins, kind of like one of those players you love to hate kind of thing. But the last couple of years just have shown a different side of him in a lot of ways that maybe Boston fans were more aware of, but the rest of us were just getting to know a little bit more since, he got traded to Florida. And just what a tremendous thing to do to support a friend like that. And it just shows that you never know with some people. And I have certainly had my mind changed about him.
Well, and it's one of those amazing examples of, anytime there's some sort of a tragedy that happens, a lot of times we see people say, I wish there was something that I could do. And it's just, it had never occurred to me that, Marchand could assist, obviously in many ways, I'm sure that we did not hear about, but in this instance, you need somebody to step in and coach your team for a couple of days. I'm absolutely willing to do that, willing to step in, willing to do what I can to help out. And, props to the Panthers too. I know you never want to see a player like miss games, but props to the Panthers for saying you absolutely go do what you need to do. We'll be here when you get back, and kind of putting that's there's bigger things going on than just sports on this whole story.
Yeah, absolutely. Just again, a tremendous thing for him to have done. And, looking at kind of the logistics of making it happen and the fact that he had some travel delays, apparently trying to get back to the Florida Panthers just to make it to play in that game. I know there's like moments where emotion and adrenaline kind of carry you through any given situation. This is clearly one of those things, but I think just to be welcomed back to Florida after doing something like that and to have a good game like that, I'm sure it's just meaningful, not just to him, but to, the family he was supporting.
Yeah, it was one of those just incredible sports moments that you see throughout the course of the seasons. But that is what we have for you for today's episode of Locked On NHL. So again, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got a full array of hosts throughout the week here on Locked On NHL. So make sure you follow along each and every day as we guide you through the biggest news throughout the National Hockey League. And also make sure to check out game recaps on Locked On NHL Game Night, which comes at you every night of the week as well. Again, that's going to cut it here for today's episode. Rachel, thanks for hopping in here on a Tuesday edition of the show. And
always good to see you, Seth.
Yeah, and listeners, we will see you on the next edition of Locked On NHL. We are your team each and every day.